I thought part 2 was going to be about testing Machiavelli. Instead, I think I accidentally discovered why his argument has survived for more than 500 years. Because I don't think his strongest argument is actually about fear. I think it's about something much deeper. It's about certainty. If you didn't see part 1, here's the short version. Machiavelli is famous for writing, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most conversations stop there, but when I actually read The Prince, I found a sentence that completely changed how I understood that quote. He says, "A wise ruler should rely on what is under his own control, not what depends on others." That made me realize, maybe this was never really about fear versus love. Maybe it was about certainty and uncertainty. In part 1, I realized I'd been arguing with a weaker version of Machiavelli's idea. The famous quote isn't really the point. The stronger argument is that a ruler should rely on what is under his own control. At first, I thought that simply meant fear was easier to maintain than love. But the more I thought about it, the less convinced I became. Then another question hit me. Maybe I was still asking the wrong question. Can you actually know whether someone is loyal? Really know? You can hope, you can believe it, but can you verify it? Not really. Love, trust, loyalty, they're all internal states. You never get direct access to them. You only get signals. But obedience is different. Obedience is visible. You can see it. You can measure it. You can act on it. And suddenly, I realized I might have been missing an even stronger version of Machiavelli's argument. Maybe fear isn't better because it's stronger. Maybe it's better because it's easier to verify. That changes everything. Imagine you're ruling Florence 500 years ago. Foreign powers are invading. Alliances change constantly. Assassinations are real. A mistake isn't embarrassing. A mistake can get you imprisoned or killed. This wasn't hypothetical for Machiavelli. After the Medici returned to power, he lost his position, was imprisoned, and later wrote The Prince after experiencing just how unstable politics could be. In that world, would you rather depend on something invisible or something you can actually observe? I don't have to agree with Machiavelli to admit that's a much stronger argument than the version most people criticize. But then, the investigation took another turn. Because fear doesn't enforce itself. A ruler doesn't personally punish everyone. Power moves through soldiers, officials, advisors, messengers, tax collectors. Every layer depends on another human being. Which means the ruler still has the same problem. How do you know your own people will actually carry out your orders? Will they obey because they're afraid? Because they're loyal? Because they believe? The uncertainty didn't disappear. It just moved. And that's when something else started bothering me. Maybe I've been treating fear and trust unfairly. I criticized fear because it depends on other people. But doesn't trust depend on other people too? If you build a company on trust, don't your managers also have to be trustworthy? If you build an army on loyalty, don't your officers also have to stay loyal? Delegation creates uncertainty, no matter what system you're using. So maybe that isn't the real difference after all. Then what is? The more I sat with it, the more I realized I wasn't really comparing fear and trust anymore. I was comparing two different ways of dealing with the same problem. Fear creates stability that's visible, immediate, easy to verify. Trust creates stability that's deeper, but much harder to measure. Neither one eliminates uncertainty. They manage uncertainty differently. And honestly, that surprised me, because I came into this investigation expecting to prove Machiavelli wrong. Instead, I kept finding stronger versions of his argument, not because I agree with him, because I think it's only fair to criticize the strongest version, not the weakest one. There's one thing I should mention. Scholars still debate whether The Prince was sincere advice or whether Machiavelli was exposing how tyrants think. I'm not trying to settle that debate here. For this investigation, I'm simply treating the argument as seriously as possible to see if it survives. So where does that leave us? I don't think this investigation is really about fear anymore, and I don't think it's really about love. I think it's about a much deeper question. What problem was Machiavelli actually trying to solve? Because surviving a political conspiracy, building a healthy company, raising children, and keeping a marriage together don't obviously seem like the same problem. Or maybe they are. I'm not sure anymore. But I do know this. If they aren't the same problem, why would we expect the same advice to work for all of them? And if they are, then maybe Machiavelli has something far more universal to teach us than I ever imagined. That's where part 3 begins, not by asking whether Machiavelli was right, but by asking, were we ever trying to solve the same problem he was?